took the test, failed the test. It's unfortunate. It's pretty disappointed. But, it is what it is. And clearly I wasn't ready. And went home, took a bunch of notes, wrote down all the things that I got wrong that I could remember, all the questions. And then now I'm going to pass it, hopefully. So I'm going to go through, just kind of show you what I can remember that was on the test, the things you got to know for sure, and yeah, what I remember from the test and things you got to know for sure. So you got to get 70% or more on the test to pass. I got 68. I was hoping I'd at least get one more, so it'd be a funny score, but it was just frustrating all in all. So couple of the things. It's 120 questions and 120 minutes to take the test. You can mark the questions and then go back to them, which is nice. I did that on 17 of them or something. So there's not that many questions. This is the book I have, the 6th edition. So what up? There's not that many questions about the nervous system, which I was surprised about since that's really important. I thought it was going to be a lot of questions about the 3 functions of the nervous system. Sensory, and then analyzing, interpreting the information, and then physically doing something about it. So it wasn't that much about that. There was a couple questions about the Golgi tendon organ. You got to know about that. There was a couple questions about this. There was no questions about epimysium, paramysium, endomysium. But there was a question about the Z-lines on the sarcomere and how they get closer together when the muscle contracts. So you got to know that. There was no questions about the type 1, type 2, but that's good to know. There was a couple questions, I think, about depressions and processes. Got to know the difference between ligaments and tendons. There was, I think, a question about the different joints. Hinges are just moving through sagittal plane, and elbows and ankles. Ball and socket are all 3 planes of motion. Shoulders, hips. There was a question about insulin, and the question is something like what regulates energy and glucose metabolism in the body or something, and it's like insulin. So you got to know this about the heart. Not only you got to know about arteries carrying blood away from the heart and veins transporting it back to the heart, and that capillaries are the smallest blood vessels, but you got to know that the right atrium is what gathers the deoxygenated blood returning to the heart from the body, and then from the right atrium it goes to the right ventricle, which pumps the deoxygenated blood to the lungs, and then it goes back to the left atrium, which gathers the oxygenated blood from the lungs and then goes to the left ventricle, where it pumps the oxygenated blood to the body. So I thought there was going to be questions about the thickness of the lining of the atrium versus the ventricle, and that the ventricle is a little thicker because it has to use as a pump, whereas the atriums are just kind of gathering sites of the blood. So got to know that. There was a question about cardiac output, and it was what is stroke volume times heart rate, or what is cardiac output or something, and it's heart rate times stroke volume. So you got to know that. I think there was a question about dysfunctional breathing. So just look at associated with stress, anxiety, something like that. You got to know about the ATP Pc System. There's a question which energy system is used when you're doing a 40-yard dash, and that would be the ATP Pc System. Lasts 10 to 15 seconds, high intensity. And then there's a question which energy system is being used when you're training for a marathon, and then that would be the oxidative system, making ATP through oxygen. So you need to know that. You need to know I don't think this was on it at all, the levers. And the levers, the first class is the fulcrum is in the middle, second class resistance is in the middle, and then the third class is The effort is in the middle, so that's free. That's how I remembered it. FRE. 1, 2, 3, FRE. You need to know the anatomical locations of everything. I don't think they had anything about contralateral, ipsilateral, but you should know that. Right there, a little diagram. Oh, I should say too, this is the study guide that I got on the NASM website, and it's free to download. But I went into the library, and you get like 70 pages for free to print out a week. So I just printed that out, and so go to the NASM site, print this out. It's 48 pages. It's got pretty much everything you need to know in it, and it shows you, like, you can go here and then go there in the book, or sometimes not on this page it says it, but it shows you where in the book things are at usually. You need to know the different planes of motion: frontal, sagittal, transverse, and then it's good to know these too. Like, transverse is throwing, golfing, swinging a bat. Frontal would be side lateral raise, side lunge, side shuffle, and then sagittal would be bicep curls, tricep push down, squats. So I don't think there were that many questions about that, but it's good to know. Joint motions, you got to know all of these: dorsiflexion, plantar flexion, extension flexion, abduction, adduction, horizontal abduction, internal rotation, external rotation. You got to know those. So you got to know planes of motion, joint motions, and anatomical locations. Those are huge for if you're trying to be in personal training at all. Concentric, eccentric, isometric, another huge thing you got to know. Pretty simple. You know, this is shorten muscles, lengthen muscles, same length muscles. Concentric is pushing the bar, having more force going against your muscles. And then eccentric would be like the bar coming down. Say you're bench pressing, the bar is coming down to your chest, you're controlling it coming down, that's eccentric, and then pushing it back up, concentric. And then isometric would be holding it in one place so that it's the same, you're putting the same amount of force out as is putting in. So like stopping halfway up on a bench press and then holding it there would be isometric. So there was a question about length tension relationships, something like, what is the effect, or what is the purpose of a cool down or something? And it's like to bring the length tension relationships back to normal, back to proper optimal function or something. There was a question about autogenic inhibition. That one, when I first was learning about that, it was like, what is this? And I read, when neural impulses that sense tension are greater than the impulses that cause muscle to contract, inhibits muscle spindles. That's pretty much just the activation of the Golgi tendon organ and allowing the muscle to relax. So that's what autogenic inhibition is. Reciprocal inhibition, say you're doing a curl and your muscle, your bicep will shorten at the same time as your tricep will lengthen, allowing motion. So that's good to know as well. You need to know the OPT model. That's huge. That's just NASM's, pretty much their basis for training in the stages. So you need to know stabilization, strength, power, and then the 3 in strength. And you need to know like certain exercises that you use for each of them, the amount of reps that you do for each of them, the amount of sets you do from each of them, and the amount of time in between each set. And that's pretty much it. And so it's kind of, it's like when you take your test to drive, and you need to know, like, you need to be 30 feet or 15 feet or whatever it is, I don't even know, from a stop sign when you park your car. It's stuff like that you need to know. So that's kind of tough to know. I don't think there was anything here. Oh, feedback. There was internal versus external feedback. I think there were some questions about that. Proprioception, just the cumulative sensory input from all mechanoreceptors that sense position and limb movements. I don't think there was anything about that, but that's a word you need to know. There were some questions about carbohydrates. I'll get to that in a sec. Glucose, glycogen, you need to know. Glycogen is just, glucose that's stored in the liver and in muscle tissue. You need to know that. Triglycerides is just the chemical form of most fat in food and in the body. Saturated versus unsaturated fats. Proteins, amino acids, complete proteins, supplying all the essential amino acids versus incomplete. You need to know just the difference between micronutrients, vitamins and minerals needed for health, water. You need to know macronutrients, protein, carbohydrates, fats. So pretty easy there. Body 60% water. I don't think that was on there. You need to know that how much water to drink per day. 3 liters a day for men, 2.2 for women. And there was a question about, one of the answers was like drink a sports drink, and I was like, I don't know if that's the best thing to do after a workout. It says if exercise exceeds 60 minutes, use sports drink containing up to 8% carbs. I'm not sure. I just wrote that down. I know that was something about that was on the test, so look into that. Drink an extra 8 ounces of fluid for every 25 pounds overweight. I don't know if that was on there, but good to know. This was on there, the thermic effect of food. Just know that it takes a little bit of energy to digest food. You need to know protein is 4 calories per gram. Carbohydrates, 4 calories per gram. Fats, 9 calories per gram. You need to know that. And then one question was, like, how many carbohydrates do you need on a daily basis, and what percentage of carbohydrates make up a daily allowance for food intake, allowance of macronutrients. And it was 45 to 65% of the diet should be carbohydrates, according to this. Not much on here. For fat loss, I think there was a question actually on here. 4 to 6 meals a day to help control your hunger, minimize blood sugar fluctuation, increase energy. I think that one might have been on there. So look, just the differences of training people who are looking for fat loss versus lean mass gain versus general health. Just know that. There was a question about this, and I want to say that both of these answers were on there. What do you recommend for someone trying to get some lean mass, muscle mass? Eat 4 to 6 meals a day and ingest carbs and protein within 90 minutes of exercise to increase recovery and protein synthesis. I'm pretty sure both of those were on there. So again, pick the one that's the best. I might be wrong. It might have been like 2 to 3 meals a day or something. But know the differences between the different clients that you'll be working with and what their goals are. Ergogenic aid, something that enhances athletic performance. That's a question on there. It's like, what is an ergogenic aid or something? It's all multiple choice. You need to know the PAR-Q is just a questionnaire for people coming in like right away. I think that's like one of the first things that they do is fill out a form questionnaire. I want to say there's a question about dress shoes, but could be wrong about that. But there was a question about like, what do you need to know about clients right away, and it was injuries and surgeries. It was like 2 separate ones. I chose injuries. I think that one is the correct answer, because there's a lot more on this list of that are injuries instead of surgeries. There were a couple about medications. There was one with like, if you have cardiac arrhythmia or arrhythmia, then what is a common medication prescribed for arrhythmia? And that would be beta blockers to help lower the heart rate and blood pressure. So if that's one, then if you see that one, that's what the answer is to that one. And let's see. You need to know how to calculate maximum heart rate, 220 minus your age, and that's not accurate, the most accurate thing you can do, but it's pretty good. But don't think that it is 100% accurate. You need to know the YMCA 3-minute step test, the Rockport walk test, which I don't really know much about, and the 2 locations taken to take your pulse from, resting heart rate, and systolic, dystolic. This wasn't on there at all, but how I remember it is systolic is the pressure within your arteries after the heart contracts or as it's contracting, and the way I remember that is like tss, 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 like when people are hitting pads, like tss, 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 tss. That's how I remember that. It's kind of weird, but dystolic is the pressure within the arteries when the heart is resting and filling with blood, and I remember that as like when you're getting your blood pressure drawn, and then at the very end it's like tss, it has like a D-I-S-S-S-S, dystolic. That's how I remember. Diastolic. That's how I remember that. So sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Let's see. One of the questions on here was Skinfold measurements, where are those taken? The 4 sites, and that's biceps, triceps, subscapular, and iliac crest. So you need to know that. During Wormsley formula, I think there was a question about that. Not 100% sure, but I didn't know it at all, and I kind of guessed, I think. Fat mass equals body fat percentage times scale weight. And then the question that was on there was, how do you calculate lean body mass or something? And it was scale weight minus fat mass. So you need to know that. It's like scale weight minus fat mass and scale weight times fat mass. It's the minus one. I don't think there's any questions about underwater weighing, bioelectrical impedance, BMI. There might have been a question about BMI. When is somebody obese? And that's like 30% or more. Shark skill test, Davies test, bench press test, squat test, push-up test, left test. You gotta know all those. So there was a question like, if somebody has arthritis in their knees, which test do you do? And it was Davies test, shark skill test, what are the other ones? The 3-minute YMCA test, step test, and the Rockport walk test. And I wasn't sure because I said the 3-minute step test because I wasn't really sure about the Rockport walk test. Shark skill test is way too rigorous on the knees, and the Davies test is in a push-up position, touching, each wrist, alternating, going back, touching your wrist. So I didn't think it was that one, or I thought it might be that one actually, because you're not even messing with your knees hardly at all. But I said it was a 3-minute step test because that's not rigorous at all, super chill, and that was my guess. The overhead squat assessment, you need to know this. This is huge. It's going to say, when you're excessively leaning forward, what are overactive muscles? There was a girl on YouTube who hooked it up with the answer on this one for me. Overactive muscles, HAGs, underactive muscles, age, just for the excessive leaning forward, and during the overhead squat assessment. And that's the hip flexor complex, abdominal complex, gastrocnemius, soleus. Overactive, HAGs, and underactive is the anterior tibialis, gluteus maximus, and erector spinae, age. So it's kind of good to know that one. And then just you need to know all these. This is kind of tough. I cram this right before I take the test, and it's good in my mind. And hopefully eventually when I start to use